Gunnedah residents were left with little option but to sit back and watch as the runoff from Tamworth's floods reached their doorsteps. The water was supposed to peak at 7 metres at midday. At 4 o'clock it was 7.5 and rising.
Well, of course, as you know, water flows downhill and we're getting the lot down here.
Overnight, dozens of low-lying properties were evacuated. Lee Hazelwood was one of the first to be told she'd have to go.
I said, oh no. They said, you've got to get out, you've got to go.
And they were good to you? They helped?
Oh, darling, they were just marvellous. Like, we just bought a brand new freezer, a brand new washing machine. They took it all, took it up the town hall.
Today, she returned home to a flooded nightmare.
This is the lounge room. I just finished painting the bathroom and
Gunnedah Council viewed the region from the air. They're expecting major damage to roads and surrounding farming properties. Most of the town's SES volunteers returned home late last night from Tamworth. They're frustrated people are still choosing to ignore flood warnings.
What I would like to ask you is that we keep people away from roads that are flooded. Storm drains, we've had people in storm drains here, which is unbelievable. It is highly dangerous, and I would just like to see that these people don't go anywhere near these drains.
Elspeth Taylor, NBN News.
After holding our breath during the mini-budget, the Hunter could be up for a windfall as the state government works out how to divvy up the extra Commonwealth funding.
I guess the job of the local MPs and for me as Minister is to make sure that we go in there and fight for our share.
Some of the projects Ms McKay hopes could benefit include the Maitland Hospital Emergency Department and the overhaul of the James Fletcher Hospital. Infrastructure too on the priority list, including the F3 link to Branxton and other big-ticket items.
But I think that there are opportunities for us, particularly there with the port. We've also allocated the freight passenger line as an important one for the federal government to work with us on as an infrastructure project.
Penny Evans, NBN News. After 12 months of consultation, 40 extra bus stops are now in service. And although the number of routes has decreased from 29 to 26, we're being promised a more comprehensive and convenient bus network that focuses on popular areas like shopping centres, hospitals, the university and honeysuckle.
Some people have a reduction in frequency or may have a service that doesn't operate as close to their place as it did previously. But overall, our expectation is that there's a significant benefit for the community.
Although he warns peak hour tomorrow will be a challenge.
Our hope is that it all runs smoothly, but we expect it'll probably take a few days for things to settle in, and we'd ask people just to work with us, give us that opportunity to bed things in.
Adjustments will be made if needed.
Like anything, there'll no doubt be improvements we can make, and we'd probably look to make those at the end of the first or early in the second quarter next year.
That's also when fares will go up by a minimal amount to be set by the Pricing Tribunal. Mr Witherden insists it's still the cheapest bus service in New South Wales. Penny Evans, NBN News.
As world champion, Chad Reed was always expected to take out the inaugural Australian Super X title, but he still needed to win the final event in Brisbane to make sure of it. And he repeated the effort in all 4 sprint races that made up the final round to win in front of a record crowd for an event like this in Australia. Disappointment for Saltash speedster Luke George in the Pro Lights. Bravely riding with a leg injury, he failed to finish the final and tumbled out of the top 3 for the overall series. Danny Anderson was 4th on the night and for the championship. If that looked tough, try getting through this. Surf boats from along the east coast battled monster surf on day 1 of their craft carnival at Coffs Harbour. Those that survived in one piece made it to the relative calm of today's finals, which saw Dixon Park finish 2nd against Kurrawa from the Gold Coast in the open final.
The federal government's paper on an emissions trading scheme is scheduled to be released on December 15. The Hunter Business Chamber says it's already affecting business confidence, with large companies in the region deferring $1 billion worth of investment.
So that's money which would go into local production, to employ people and to produce equipment to be used in local companies.
Hunter Valley Research Foundation findings show around 36,000 jobs could be affected by the scheme. And if large energy producers are hit hard, consumers will pay more.
They will increase their costs. And so there is talk of the cost of electricity going up by around about 40%.
The Business Chamber is calling on the region's federal politicians to make their voices heard in Canberra.
We need to have control over the cost of carbon dioxide so that it doesn't put Hunter businesses out of business.
Mr Shinnick says if the scheme is implemented too quickly, large companies won't adapt and could move their operations overseas to save money. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Todd Andrew Pearce broke 2 of Con Carafillis' ribs when he stabbed him in the back on August 18 last year. The judge wouldn't accept Pearce's plea for manslaughter when his trial began on November 10, and the 25-year-old was trialled for murder. But 10 days into his trial, it was abandoned after Pearce changed his plea to guilty. Today he faced Newcastle Supreme Court, where Judge Megan Latham said he has been offered drug and alcohol counselling and resolutely and somewhat honestly refused. In the face of a rather obstinate attitude, the client appears to be simply giving up. To which Mr Pearce's barrister Paul Winch replied, there was some evidence of remorse to be found in the intention to plead guilty to manslaughter. As time goes by, as he turns into a mature man, his attitude may mellow.
Mr Pearce's barrister is seeking a reduced sentence based on the grounds the attack didn't appear to be premeditated or frenzied. The case was adjourned until December 17. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
Last year's June storm helped to generate one of the biggest prawn hauls on the Hunter River in recent history. The local industry was hoping for a flow-on effect when the new season started this morning, but for fishermen like Paul Doyle, this wasn't the catch they were expecting.
Yeah, not much today, but I should get better. A couple of hot days and they should grow a bit, and yeah, first day's always a learning curve.
For the 5th year in a row, the later starting date of December 1st was chosen to allow prawns to breed and grow. With the cost of fuel also dropping, conditions were supposed to be just right.
The price of fuel really does affect us, especially when we're not catching much like that. It's not worthwhile going to work sometimes. It costs you money to go to work, so why bother going?
Part of the blame could lie with colder than average water temperatures in the river, but where there's prawns, there's hope.
The Mile Lake has already started pretty well, and Tuggerah Lakes. So we've been getting good catches from there over the last month.
Hunter fishermen aren't prepared to put the season on ice just yet.
But look, it's early days yet. We can go and get a heat tomorrow type of thing, so it's just a waiting game.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
It's not a bad place to do business, and a long way from the offices at BHP, where it all began in 1952. The purpose-built headquarters was 3 years in the planning, and today NIB's 400 employees, including the 150 call centre staff, moved in, and the new digs has got the thumbs up.
Someone actually said to me this morning, I want to come to work on Saturday and Sunday now.
NIB's Deputy Chief Executive Michelle McPherson says the decision to build at Honeysuckle is a sign of the company's commitment to its roots.
We've been very clear about that all the way through our demutualisation and listing. The Hunter is our base. We see a lot of advantages in that.
Last year, NIB's profits were 3 times that of the industry average, and the new location allows for even further growth within the company.
There's a surplus floor within the building that we're looking to tenant at the moment, level 2. We've also got a 156-seat call centre. We're not totally at capacity with that at the moment on level 3, so there are certainly opportunities for growth within the building.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
Ever the professional Ante Kovic fronted for work today after a day at the office he'd rather forget.
It just seems to be one of those years where, everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
It couldn't have been more evident in that frantic finish against Adelaide. Having kept Newcastle in it late in the game with some great saves, the big glove man was caught out with disastrous results.
I don't slip and it goes straight into my hands and the game's won.
But that's Newcastle's lot at present, and it gets no easier, with Tarek Eldridge joining captain Jade North on the injured list this week. Having signed to play for Townsville next season, North shot down reports today he's headed to an overseas club sooner rather than later.
I've got no idea what you're talking about. It's the first I've heard of it. I'm just here trying to concentrate and do my job here. I haven't heard anything, so that's news to me.
That means playing and beating Sydney this weekend as both teams seek to keep ever-slimming finals hopes alive.
There's no point throwing in the towel now. There's 24 points up for grabs and we've got to get as many as we can and fight to the very end.
Thanks to its partnership with the Wests Group, the Newcastle Knights have come a long way in a few short years when it comes to training facilities and resources. When being based out of a rusted shipping container was once the norm, state-of-the-art GPS tracking systems are now commonplace.
We're now somewhere near the top instead of being distantly at the bottom.
Used across a range of training disciplines, the real-time analysis opens the door to a host of training possibilities, with staff able to implement more efficient techniques while limiting injury. It's a bit like a version of Big Brother. Someone is always watching. But there's a long view in all of this. In short, there's more to be learnt, and the Knights want to be in the middle of it. They're forming a panel of experts in the field of sports science and injury management to explore smarter ways of doing things.
That people can come there and throw crazy ideas on the table and just see if they have an application to what the NRL and what the Knights are doing.
But our goal is to become the leading club in this area.
It's the jewel in Lake Macquarie's crown, but keeping it pristine is a thorn in Council's side. Since 1999, property owners have been paying a little extra on top of their annual rates to finance lake improvement projects. But it got harder for Council when the state government pulled its support of the scheme.
The government has changed its approach to that funding, and we haven't seen the same sort of funds coming from the state for the last couple of years.
The existing lake levy will expire in June, so Lake Macquarie City Council wants to introduce a new one, costing residents around $26 per year and businesses about $81. The Environment and Sustainability Levy would be only slightly more expensive than its predecessor.
In these tough economic times, people want a good reason before they fork out any of their hard-earned cash. While the existing lake improvement project has seen a dramatic increase in water clarity and also been recognised with a national award, the council says it can still do better.
There's still room for plenty of improvement, and we'll continue to seek out those opportunities. So yeah, we don't intend resting on our laurels.
Residents we spoke to today supported the scheme.
It's very important to keep the lake looking good.
Well, I suppose it wouldn't make a great deal of difference to the family budget, but if it's going to really improve stuff around here, sounds like a good idea to me.
$2 extra, which for the sake of looking after our environment, I think it's well worth it.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Installed in the early 70s, the gates at Ironbark Creek were only supposed to be closed when the Hunter River was in flood to protect surrounding pastures. But they ended up stopping the water altogether, slowly destroying the wetlands and killing the habitat for water birds and fish. Now, 40 years on, this group of stakeholders was briefed today about how the state and federal governments have spent $6 million buying out surrounding farmers so the flow can be restored.
This action is going to allow the tides to come and go out of Ironbark Creek, which is a substantial creek, and it was just a fantastic fisheries nursery habitat and king prawn production area. And so this ends up on every people's plates, people that love to have their prawns at Christmas, and this is part of the whole system that makes that possible.
This Ironbark Creek, it's going to get that kicking back into gear, because this was used to be a #1 prawning creek. The Hexham Swamp is recognised as probably the most productive eastern king prawn nursery on the east coast of Australia. So we've got that to look forward to.
The gradual opening of the gates is expected to start in late January. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Sydney Gas is keen to debunk myths about the $10 billion coal seam methane field it's uncovered between Singleton and Scone.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what we're going to do, a lot of misunderstanding of what the impact will be. There's been a lot of scaremongering by a certain number of people.
Mr Lucas insists it would be low impact visually.
Pipelines are all buried. There'd be a number of compressor stations, and these would be set up in industrial areas.
And low impact environmentally, rejecting concerns the water table would be threatened.
We will be very careful. We're obviously not going to drill or produce from areas that are going to have any sort of impact on the aquifers.
He says it's also better for the atmosphere.
Gas is certainly a transition energy in that gas has half the greenhouse effect of burning coal.
And unlike large-scale mining, Sydney Gas believes farmers and property holders would be better off.
Totally not comparable, yes. They'd still have their land, they would still own their land, and they'd have 100% access to their land.
Sydney Gas says 150 to 200 jobs would be created, while new infrastructure, including a supply pipeline to Hexham, needs to be built. With production unlikely to start before 2011, there's still a while to go before the project is proven commercially viable. Flow tests will begin mid-next year. Penny Evans, NBN News.
For all intents and purposes, this simulated airbase lies in the midst of a country in crisis. The fictional Nessos Mikros is located 1,800 kilometres off the east coast of Australia, and the RAF has been called in to help.
There's been a breakdown in the government and law and order, and also the skirmishes amongst various militia groups within the country. Again, I stress it's only a national country, and hence we've been provided to us to provide whatever support is required to the government here.
The remote airfield and evacuation centre has actually been set up in the Hunter Valley as part of a Williamtown RAF base training operation called Exercise Nighthawk. It includes everything a real airbase would, like a mess, airstrip, medical tent capable of life-saving operations, communication centre and headquarters full of sophisticated electronic equipment. For the past 9 days, 100 armed personnel have come under attack from militia groups, dealt with plane crashes and run out of water, all scenarios that could occur in the field. Today, airmen had to decide what to do when a busload of unidentified civilians arrived at the base, asking to be evacuated back to Australia.
It is a way that we can test all our capabilities in the field, so that if we have to deploy to somewhere within Australia or overseas, we know that we are ready to do so.
Exercise Nighthawk wraps up tomorrow. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
They may be riding the crest of a mid-season wave to the top, but that doesn't mean anyone's safe in the Jets W League team.
We mentioned that she missed training last night. She forgot.
Oh, that was an easy mistake.
The captain not missing her young gun today, but Nicole Jones has been just as sharp on field of late. Warming the bench not long ago, 2 goals in 2 games is great shooting.
So the more time I get on the field and the more I score and stuff, and the encouragement.
That confidence is reflected throughout the squad, which has gone from second last to fighting for outright second on the ladder in 2 games, and have striker Katie Gill coming back from suspension.
It's who do we leave out to bring Katie back in?
It could hardly be Emily Van Egmond. While her dad Gary may be facing a tough task with his A-League team, his 15-year-old daughter's star continues to rise in the women's competition.
She wants to train every day. She wants to go away on every trip and every tour. Sometimes you got to reel them back, just to let them, they're kids, let them have fun still, and, not to push them too hard.
Luke McDougall has spent too much time doing this over the last 2 seasons, with almost more trips to specialists than actual games in that time. It's only now he feels like the long trip back to full fitness is nearing its end.
For the first time in the last 2.5 years, I've got a definite plan, and there's some certainty of when I can return.
It follows 2 failed attempts to repair a ruptured tricep injury. When a full reconstruction didn't work, McDougall did some of his own, on the internet and phone, to find the world's leading venue for such injuries, and it was in Alabama.
All the NFL players, baseball players, and all the elite sportsmen in the States who had shoulder or elbow problems all went to this place and had surgery there, and they had it rehabbed there.
And after some sweet talking and the Knights backing, so did Luke. In less than 3 weeks, the results have been better than those in the previous 2 years. If it continues on that scale, McDougall will be right to play come Game 1 next season. And he's hopeful it'll be alongside his brother Adam, who remains unsigned as yet.
I come here with a hope that I'd get to, pull on the red and blue with him, and just haven't had the opportunity. So it'll be great that if he stays.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
We're using some of the sponsorship funds from this fruit and veggie drive to purchase new sports equipment, so it's sort of a double barrel thing.
Greeter technician Jeffrey Johnson and his Tamworth assistant John Turner were killed after being hit by a coal train in the early hours on the 16th of July 2007 while they were fixing faulty points near Singleton. No less than 8 groups, including the men's families, are represented at the inquest into their deaths, being overseen by Coroner Stephen Jackson. Today, the court heard no risk assessment of the job could be found. The pair were working under a system known as NAR, meaning no authority required, where one worker is supposed to keep watch at all times. The Office of Transport Safety Investigations carried out its own inquiry. Today, investigator Ron Barnes gave evidence to the coroner. He described the NAR system as dangerous because you have to keep such a vigilant lookout, adding there should have been other protections on the track or stop trains running. Mr Barnes believes the work could have been delayed to daylight because the first train to use the points wasn't due until 9:30am. He also raised concern about the safety vests the pair were wearing because there was no light to make them reflective until the trains were close. Mr Barnes stood by the recommendations of the Office of Transport Safety Investigations report, although he was unaware if any had been implemented. Magistrate Jackson reminded the court the inquest has a limited nature and is not designed to lay the groundwork for proceedings in other jurisdictions. After today's hearing, the inquest will recommence in late January. Penny Evans, NBN News.
Newcastle City councillors say there's no point cutting the rail line just yet.
Until there is a fully funded option that is presented to us or to other levels of government for consideration that would provide a world-class, integrated and viable public transport option, those rail lines will remain in place.
Meaning council would reconsider its position if and when a realistic alternative to the train line is proposed.
No one's actually put any money on the table to do any of this. So we don't want to come out and say, oh yes, cut it up here, because then there'll be nothing left.
While the rail's future will ultimately be decided by the state, councillors say their views should count.
We want to remain in the debate, but we want to take a very rational and considered approach.
The business sector has mixed feelings.
It was probably a little bit disappointing that there wasn't an agreement on the fate of the railway line, but the compromise in the end was a good result.
Meanwhile, Singleton residents are pushing City Rail for more direct trains to and from Newcastle.
At this stage we're asking for just 2 more trains so that we get a train between the early morning and the late morning train, and again in the afternoon.
Residents say the trains would help the elderly get to doctor's appointments and students to university.
I think it would make it a much more reasonable form of transport for people to access, because at this stage they have to stay too long in Newcastle.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It was a debut season on the US PGA Tour that went from bad to worse for Nick Flanagan. Having failed to automatically qualify, he then withdrew from qualifying school with back spasms.
The back was a little bit sore. I wouldn't say that was really the main reason I shot what I shot. That was more me and my average game at the moment. It's been a tough year.
The Lake Macquarie golfer believes he can reclaim a place on the world's most lucrative tour, but for now he's happy to go back to a series where he's already won 3 events. In an added bonus, fellow Hunter product James Nitties could join him next season.
James and myself travelled a lot together as amateurs and when we first turned pro, so obviously he'd be another good guy to have out in the nationwide with the rest of the gang.
The 24-year-old won't play at the Australian PGA at Coolum, but does have his eye on the Australian Open title.
I've always loved Royal Sydney and I played well there a few years ago, and the Australian Open's really probably one of my favourite events.
After the Open, Flanagan wants some quality time with family and friends.
Going down the beach, going for a surf and just relaxing and getting my mind away from golf.
He'll round out the summer by playing in nationwide sanctioned events in Melbourne and New Zealand before returning to the US. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. He doesn't need any help drawing a crowd, but Chad Reed arrived in Newcastle today with someone who's even more popular than he is. The 26-year-old should be riding high after winning his own National Supercross series, but his focus has already turned to next year and securing a round of the series at Energy Australia Stadium.
We didn't get to tick that box this year, but hopefully next year. I'd love the last round to be here. I think it'd be awesome to end it on a good note in Newcastle.
V8 supercar drivers Craig Lowndes and Jamie Whincup dropped by to challenge Reed to a race of a different kind, before they head to Sydney to fight for a championship of their own. Having already driven practice laps under the guidance of Whincup, the world champion admits he'd like to be on 4 wheels within 4 years.
Definitely, one day I'd love to go to V8 supercars. I've followed it, as a kid and even abroad. I've, looked up on the internet and, kept in touch.
But for now, the focus is squarely on retaining his world title.
I've never been able to defend, and it's tough. I won in 2004, and it was a tough year after that. Actually, a tough 4 years.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
On Hunter Street in the early hours of Sunday, the 17th of February this year, Kurt Moroney was punched to the ground, then, while unconscious, kicked and stomped on. The young soldier sustained a serious brain injury and has spent much of the past 10 months in and out of hospital. Father of 3, Daniel McRae, was charged over the attack and pleaded guilty to recklessly inflicting grievous bodily harm. During today's sentencing proceedings, the victim described how his life had changed since that incident. I have to drink with a straw. I can't even do my own shoelaces and buttons. I have to have help for the most basic functions. I am angry that my life has been hijacked from me and I'm trapped in a body that doesn't work properly anymore. 4 operations have left Kurt Moroney with a scar that runs across his scalp. In court today was the first time McRae had seen his victim since the attack, the first time he'd been able to see the extent of the injuries that he inflicted. When asked how he felt about that, McRae replied, "Sad. I'm shattered." His solicitor asked Judge Ralph Coulihan to consider the offender's early plea, dysfunctional childhood and good prospects of rehabilitation when deciding on a sentence. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Les and Debbie Penfold know all too well how hard it can be to rent a home in Raymond Terrace.
We went through nearly all the estate agents down in the Terrace, looked at about 12, 13 houses.
All up, the couple spent nearly 3 months searching for a home before they finally gave up on the area and moved north to Karua.
Well, I didn't want to really move to Karua, but of course we couldn't get a house down there. We had to do something, so we took this one.
Real estate agents say it's a familiar story.
It is very hard for these people to get properties because obviously, you know, when there's only 2 or 3 properties available and we've got a fairly large rent roll, well obviously it makes it pretty tough for them to get in.
Currently, just 0.85% of rental houses are vacant in the town.
I think it'll only get worse before it gets better. Obviously there's no further land developments in this town.
And Raymond Terrace isn't the only town where people are struggling to find a home. According to the latest figures from the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales, rental vacancy rates have dropped by an average of 0.3% right across the Hunter. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It's the 60s and everybody's swinging, except down at Merewether Beach they're doing something different. They're surfing. Back in the days when they wore football jerseys if the water got cold, one of Newcastle's most iconic breaks was dishing up the good, bad, big, small, lefts and rights that would eventually carve out world champions.
Mark Richards started surfing at Blacksmiths and Robbie Woods brought him into Merewether. And over the years, the local people who were really serious about their surfing all came to Merewether.
Arguably the world's longest running, Merewether Surfboard Club's members list reads like a surfing hall of fame. Robbie and Nicky Wood, Luke Egan, Matt Hoy and of course the incomparable Mark Richards.
To, I guess, the non-trained eye it looks like one wave, but to the guys who surf it there's 4 or 5 different waves which break on the rock platform.
Rocks, ladies, second or third reef, it's all Merewether, and if the locals have their way, it's never going to change. They're looking to add it to a growing list of surf reserves.
A National Surfing Reserve, in its simplest terms, it's like a national park for the surf. It just protects the surf break so that the reef can't be damaged in any way.
The steering committee hopes to have the formalities finalised by Surfest 2009. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It's his passion for policing that's kept Senior Sergeant Malcolm Reid in the job.
I've always wanted to be a policeman and it's a job that I love and I still love it today. I get up every morning with the enjoyment of coming to work, knowing that I can contribute some way to traffic policing.
For the past 14 years, he's headed the Hunters Highway Patrol. Before that, he was based in the Riverina region and Sydney. Today, his efforts were celebrated with colleagues and recognised with the Commander's Commendation. Serving 4 decades in the force is no mean feat, with the average police career lasting just 7 years. And it wasn't just his co-workers singing his praises.
Quite proud of him, actually, yeah, because I don't know whether there's a lot of other people that have clocked up that many years.
But Mal's days in highway patrol are coming to an end.
I'll probably contribute another 12 or 18 months before I look at retiring. There are still a number of projects that I want to finish.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Four days after that disappointing draw with Adelaide, the young Jets squad has refocused for the all-important derby with Sydney.
Yeah, even today at training there's a lot more fluency than we've seen previously. So hopefully, I'm assuming that's from the confidence that we gained on the weekend, and if we can take that into the game on Sunday, we should do the job.
Matt Thompson will again play in attack after an inspired effort on Sunday.
Matt Thompson's very happy about being up front. He loves scoring goals and he loves being in that front area.
Tarek Elrich is rated a 50-50 chance, but he's determined to shake off a knee injury to play against former Jets Mark Bridge and Stuart Michalek.
Stewie is actually a very good friend of mine off the pitch. He's been saying he can't wait to come back up here and play in front of the old Newcastle crowd of his.
One player who won't follow them south is teenage defender Ben Kantarovski.
I don't really like Sydney, the city, to say, so it's a good derby clash between us. So yeah, I reckon spirits will be very high.
The 16-year-old will be part of a Jets defence charged with shutting down Michalek.
Stewie's a good player. There's no two ways about it. But again, we'll do our best and try and nullify his effectiveness on the pitch.
Van Egmond makes a welcome return to the sideline after a two-game ban. Korean import Song will be kept on ice for a week, but Joe Wheelhouse is expected to play. Meanwhile, reserve keeper Ben Kennedy will be out for at least a month following a training accident. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. He's provided timeless moments for Jets fans. But Adam Griffiths is just as happy capturing moments in time. The defender found his passion for art when his career took him overseas.
I had a lot of paintings and drawings when I was in Belgium, and developed a cartoon series because I was quite bored of painting landscapes, and from there I've created a series of paintings as well as some t-shirts.
The 29-year-old now uses painting as an escape from football and one day hopes to make it a full-time career. But does the artistic flair run in the family?
Everyone knows that he's great at the PlayStation and sits on his lounge, but Joel always tries to take the mick out of me for painting and drawing, but I'm sure I'll have the last laugh.
Tomorrow night, Griffiths will be a special guest at the Newcastle Region Art Gallery to announce the winner of the Kilgore Prize for paintings inspired by the human form. The winning artist will receive $30,000 and their piece will become part of the gallery's permanent collection.
You've got everything from the very conservative, very traditional, through to the highly conceptual, and also for some of the artists it's really just this love of paint and painting.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.